Hi, welcome back to Storytime. Today we are going to be finishing Secret Garden, this time for real. Uh, and after that, we're going to take a little bit of a break while I wait for my new computer to come. I still haven't received notification that it's been shipped, but it should be coming in this, maybe a little bit of time to adjust, get everything loaded. Maybe dabble with some gaming streams, but my primary focus is to make these story time streams nice and smooth. So, because when you're a story, you want to be able to hear what is being said. Anyways, go started. We are on chapter 23, Secret Garden. Magic. Dr. Craven had been waiting some time at the house when they returned to it. He had to wonder if it might not be wise to send out. Colin was brought back to his room, looked him over seriously. You should not have stayed out so long, he said. You must nurture yourself. I'm not tired at all, said Colin. It has made me well. Tomorrow I am going out in the morning in the afternoon. I'm not sure that I can allow it, answered Dr. Craven. Not be wise. It would not be wise to try to stop me, said Colin, quite serious going. Even Mary had found out that one of Colin's chief peculiarities was not knowing the least what a rude little brute he was, or with his way of world about. He had lived on in a sort of desert island all his life as he had king of it. And as he had been the king of it, he had made his own manners, and he had known himself with. Mary had indeed been rather like himself, and since she had been at Miss, had gradually discovered that her own manners had not been of the kind which is usually or popular. Having made this discovery, she naturally thought it enough in interest. Oh my goodness! Having made she usually thought it of enough interest to communicate to Colin. So she looked at him curiously for a few minutes after Dr. Craven had gone. She wanted to make him why she was doing it, and of course she did. What are you looking at me like that for? I'm thinking that I am rather sorry for Dr. Craven. So am I, said Colin calmly, not without an air of some satisfaction. He won't get Misselthwaite at all now. I'm not going to be. I'm sorry for him because of that, of course, said Mary. But then it must have been very horrid to have had to be polite for 10 years, who was always rude. I would never have done it. Am I rude? Colin inquired. If you had been his own boy, he would slap. He had been a slapping sort of man, said Mary. He would have slapped you. But he said, Colin. No, he daren't, answered Mistress Mary, thinking the thing out quite without. Nobody ever dared to do anything you didn't like, because you were going to die and things. You were such a poor thing. But, announced Colin stubbornly, I am a poor thing. I won't let people think I am one. I stood on my feet this. It is always having your way that has made you so queer, Mary went on, thinking aloud. He turned his head, frowning. Am I queer? He demanded. Yes, answered Mary, very. Be cross, she added impartially, because so am I queer, and so is Ben Mother. But I am not as queer as I was before I began to like people, and I don't want to be queer, said Colin. I'm not going to be, and he frowned indignation. He was a very proud boy. He lay thinking for a while, and then Mary saw his smile begin and gradually change his whole face. I shall stop being queer, he said, if I stay to the garden. There is magic in there, good magic, you know. Mary, I'm sure there is. So am I, said Mary. Even if it isn't real magic, I'll pretend it is. Something is there, something. It's magic, so black, it's as white as snow. They always call it magic, and indeed it seemed the months that followed, the wonderful months, the radiant months, the amazing ones. Oh, then in that garden. If you have never had a garden, you cannot understand, and if you have had a garden, that it would take a whole book to describe all that came to pass there. At first, the green things could never cease pushing their way through the earth and the grass and the beds, crevices of the walls. Then the green things began to show buds, and the buds began to unfurl every shade of blue, every shape of purple, every tint and hue of crimson. It, in its happy days, flowers had been tucked away into every inch corner. Ben Weatherstaff had seen it done and had himself scraped out mortar from between walls and made pockets of earth for lovely clinging things to grow on. Iris and white lilies rose out of the grass in sheaves, and green alcoves filled the main armies of the blue and white flowers, lances of tall delphiniums, of columbine pennulas. He was main fun of him. She was. Ben. She liked them things as was always pointing up to the sky, to the blue sky. She used to tell. She was one of them, as looked down on the earth, not her. She just loved it, but said, and the blue sky always made looked so joyful. The seeds Dick and Mary had placed as if fairies had tended them. Satiny poppies of all tints danced in the breeze by the score divine flowers which had lived in the garden for years, and which it might be seemed rather to wonder how such new people had got there. And the roses, rising out of the grass, tangled round the sundial, tree trunks and hanging from their branches, climbing up the walls and spreading over them with long garlanding and cascades. They came alive day by day, hour by hour, fairies and buds, tiny at first, but swelling and working magic until they burbled into cups of scent, delicately spilling themselves over and filling the garden air. Colin saw it all, watching each took place. Every morning he had was brought out in every hour of each. When it didn't rain, he spent in the garden. Even gray days pleased him. He was watching things growing, he said. If he watched long enough, he declared he could see buds up. Also, you could make the acquaintance of strange busy insects, things running about as unknown but evidently serious errands, sometimes carrying tiny scraps of straw or food, or climbing blades of grass as if they were trees those from whom one could look out to explore the country. A mole, throwing up its end of its furrow and making its way out at last with long nailed paws which looked like hands, had absorbed him one whole morning. Ants' ways, beetles' ways, frogs' ways, birds' ways, plants' ways, gave him a new world to explore, and when Dick and all and added foxes' ways, otters' ways, ferrets' ways, squirrels' ways, and rats and badgers' ways, there was no end to the thing to talk about and think of. And this was not the half of the magic. The fact that he had really once stood on set had set Colin thinking tremendously, and when Mary told him of the spell, he was excited and approved of it greatly. He talked about it constantly. Of course, there must be lots of magic in the world, he said wisely one day, but people don't know what it is like and how to make it. Perhaps the beginning is just to say nice things are going to happen till you make them happen. I'm going to try and experiment. The next morning, when the garden, he sent at once for Ben Weatherstaff. Ben came as quickly on the Rajah, standing on his feet under a tree, and looking very grand, but also very beautifully small. Good morning, Ben Weatherstaff, he said. I want you and Dickon and Miss Mary to stand in a row with me, because I am going to tell you something very important. Aye, aye, sir, answered Ben, wiping his forehead. One of the long-concealed charms of Ben Weatherstaff was that in his boyhood he went away to sea and had made voyages, so he could reply like a sailor. I'm going to try a scientific experiment, explained the Rajah. When I grow up, I am going to make scientific discoveries, and I am going to begin now with this experiment. Aye, aye, said Ben Weatherstaff promptly, though this was the first time he had heard of great scientific. It was the first time Mary had heard of them either, but even at this to realize that queer as he was, Colin had read about a great many singular things, somehow a very convincing sort of boy. When he held up his head and fixed his strain, it seemed as if you believed him almost in spite of yourself, though he was only 10 years old, going on. At this moment, he was especially convincing because he suddenly had the fascination of actually making a sort of speech like a grown-up person. Scientific discoveries I am going to make, he went on, will be about magic. Great thing, and scarcely anyone knows anything about it except a few people in old books, and because she was born in India where there are fakirs. I believe Dickon knows some magic. Perhaps he doesn't know he knows it. He charms animals and people. I would never have looked to me if he had not been an animal charmer, which is a boy charmer too, because a boy, I am sure there is magic in everything, only we have not sense enough to make it do things for us, like electricity and horses and steam. This sounded posing that Ben Weatherstaff became quite excited and really could not keep still. He said, and he began to stand quite straight. When Mary found the scar dead, the orator proceeded, then something began pushing things up out of making things out of nothing. One day things weren't there, and another they were. I saw things before, and it made me feel very curious. Scientific people are always curious, and I be scientific. I keep saying to myself, what is this? What is that thing? It can't be nothing. I don't know its name, so I call it magic. The sunrise, but Mary and Dickon have, and from what they tell me, I'm sure that is magic. Something pushes it up and draws it. Sometimes, sometimes I've been in the garden. I've looked up through the trees at the sky, and I have had a strange feeling of me, as if something were pushing and drawing in my chest and making me breathe fast. Always pushing and drawing and making things out of nothing. Everything is made out of leaves and trees, flowers and birds, badgers and foxes and squirrels and people. So all around us, in this garden, in all the places, the magic in this garden has been